Resident Evil 4 is amazing. A masterclass in encounter design, pacing, player feedback, and cheesy one-liners.
No thanks, bro.
It is one of the greatest games ever made, and I recommend it to absolutely everyone. But I already said all this stuff a few months ago. I've already spent half an hour explaining why I think RE4 is a timeless masterpiece, so why am I here telling you about it all over again? Well, in true Capcom fashion, Resi 4 has made its way to yet another platform, but this time, we're not talking about a simple port. This is Resident Evil 4 in virtual reality. Yes, RE4 VR is now out on the Oculus Quest 2. And only the Quest 2, and I have played through it. For the umpteenth time in my life, I've fought through torrents of angry villagers, solved the occasional puzzle, and rode off into the sunset with the president's daughter in tow. But I did all that looking directly through the gorgeous eyes of Secret Agent Leon S. Kennedy. So, how does our RPD alum's most memorable assignment translate to the world of VR? While there's no question I had a good time blasting through it, I wouldn't consider it in the running for best VR title, and it's definitely not the best way to play RE4, especially at its current price. But before I go on, do you like video games? Do you also like using the internet? Of course you do, you're watching a channel that requires both. So allow me to introduce you to this video's sponsor, Opera GX, the web browser specifically designed with gamers in mind. Opera stands out from other browsers thanks to cool features like GX Control, which lets you set limits on exactly how much CPU or RAM you want it using, freeing up those precious resources for your sweaty gaming sessions. There's also a network limiter letting you put a cap on just how much bandwidth Opera is using. Then there's GX Corner that helps you keep track of upcoming releases for all platforms, highlights free games to try out, lets you know about great deals, and keeps you up to date with industry news all in one convenient place. Opera is also super easy to personalize with plenty of sleek colors, themes, and wallpapers to choose from. And if you're worried about losing your browsing history and bookmarks moving from your old browser to Opera, don't fret. All you have to do is go to Settings, find Import Bookmarks and Settings, click the Import button, and bam, it's all there. Opera GX is completely free and available to download on both desktop and mobile. Click the link in the description to try it out for yourself, and big thank you to Opera GX for sponsoring the channel. It's worth pointing out again that this game is exclusive to the Oculus Quest 2. I briefly mentioned in my previous RE4 video that I thought this decision sucked, and despite now having a Quest 2 myself, I still feel this way. I kinda see VR as an entire platform in and of itself, and while it has a sizable user base, it's still relatively niche in the grand scheme. I know Facebook wants to bring people to their platform, and the Quest 2 is the most popular headset right now, but locking everybody else out, including owners of other Oculus headsets, is a dick move, and I still think this thing should come to PC VR so everyone can enjoy it. There's no reason it can't, aside from the backroom deals and truckloads of money that come with them. I also mentioned in my last video that I had an Oculus Rift S, and for those wondering, no, I did not buy a Quest 2 to replay a 16-year-old game. One of my Rift controllers started to malfunction before completely crapping out, and instead of spending almost $100 to replace a controller for hardware that has since been discontinued, I thought it best to just fully upgrade. But let's move on to the game itself. On a base level, this is Resident Evil 4 how you remember it. The environments are laid out in the same way, treasures and other items are where they've always been, and enemies appear in the same places at the same times. Though I did notice no Vista doors were missing from this particular room, but you're not going to find me complaining about that. The main thing that's changed about the world of RE4 is how you interact with it. Given the move to VR, you now play from the first-person perspective and physically interact with things. You're now the one reloading the weapons, pulling the trigger, and slashing the knife, and these actions all translate great to the medium. Resi 4 was already a satisfying action title, guns felt good to fire, so that still being the case isn't all that surprising, but putting you directly in the thick of things definitely adds a cool new dimension to the formula. The game has tons of different control options you can tweak to your liking, allowing you to customize the gameplay to fit your comfort level. You can play seated or standing, Opt for snap turning, use teleportation for movement, turn off camera shake, have weapons either on your person or in a quick select menu. There's even a separate toggle just for the Delago Lake fight. This seemed silly to me at first. I mean, why would you need a separate setting for a single 3-minute section? But after playing it firsthand, yeah, I understand why it's there. Getting thrashed around on that boat is a lot to deal with. I have hundreds of hours in VR, and even I felt a bit off by the time it was over. For purists, there's also the option to mimic the original control style by disabling strafing and limiting movement while aiming, though if you're a purist, you're probably not playing this version of the game anyway. Since I'm fully comfortable in VR, I played with no restrictions whatsoever, and it worked very well. However, playing this way led to a pretty big consequence. In my vanilla review, I talked about Leon's stiff movement, and pointed out that the rest of the game was designed around it. Enemies give you breathing room, they don't attack all at once, and this complemented our hero's tank-like control. But take those same enemy behaviors and put them in a game that lets the player move and shoot at the same time, and it kinda breaks everything in half, and as a result, RE4 in VR is an absolute cakewalk. I was making fools of these people, dancing around them like Michael Flatley, easily baiting them, using my knife as a weed whacker on downed villagers. VR shifts Leon from a highly skilled agent to an unstoppable bully. I had so many health items and grenades on me at any given time that it became an inconvenience. I was having such an easy go of it that I forgot to sell a single piece of treasure until I got to the island. Sure, maybe this has something to do with my familiarity with the source material since I know what's coming and when, but I bet that even a newbie would quickly start dominating once they got a feel for things. Oh my god, bosses. The bosses are complete pushovers thanks to this increased mobility. You have so much room to maneuver, and their attacks have such obvious windups that it's not only possible, but likely they won't land a single mutated claw on you. At one point, I thought maybe using the laser sight was playing a big part in how much I was breezing through encounters, so I turned it off for a few levels, and it didn't make any difference. I missed a bit more than usual, but I was still running circles around everyone, so it didn't really matter. That's not to say I never died, but with like one exception, my deaths were either intentional to see how they were handled in VR, or the result of cockiness making me not check my health. I never really found myself in any real danger. Maybe this is different on Professional? I don't know, I can't be bothered to play through this again right now. But since the movement wouldn't change, I'm guessing it's not all that different. This lack of challenge doesn't make the game unfun. Stomping fools provides its own satisfaction after all, but it does make the combat come off as somewhat redundant the further you get. Also contributing to this is the relatively simple weapon handling. If you've ever had the pleasure of using firearms in VR, you know just how cool it is, and that's also true here, but other games do it better. Pavlov is my go-to. It's, in my opinion, the best FPS on the platform. There's a reason I've put 240 hours into it. In comparison to that, RE4 is missing little details that I've grown to appreciate. You can't hold handguns with both hands, which at this point is a standard feature for VR shooters. You can't pull back the slide whenever you want. Taking a magazine off your belt, which I accidentally did fairly often, automatically unloads your weapon, making you vulnerable in a hectic situation. You can't reverse your grip on the knife. Shotguns only need one shell inserted to be fully loaded, and pumping them doesn't feel great with inconsistent responsiveness. It's also impossible to drop your weapons. They'll always magnetize back to your person, though I don't have a problem with this since the game would be a nightmare if you could accidentally fumble your gear off a cliff. Whether these things bother you will depend on how much experience you have with other VR action titles, and I know most of you will think I'm bitching about nothing because this is designed to appeal to more casual users. But I do wish there was some kind of extra realism option that added more to the firearm interaction, since that would also help make encounters more complex. Outside of combat, all the puzzles have made the transition, though they have been tweaked to be more VR-friendly. Instead of using a basic menu, you'll actively be rotating objects, pushing buttons on consoles, and turning cranks yourself. I'm glad they went the extra mile to redesign these puzzles for the platform, but the solutions are the same they've always been, so they were just as easy to blitz through. Managing the inventory is also very intuitive, and while there are shortcuts now for a handful of items to use in-game, you'll still be going into this screen often to swap them out. However, there is one annoying new quirk to the inventory system. In the base game, if you tried to pick up something like, say, an herb when your inventory was full, you'd be taken to this screen and given the chance to move stuff around or combine what you just found with something else, ensuring it didn't go to waste. But in this version, that doesn't happen. You're just informed that you don't have room, and if you want to make some, you have to manually open the menu and waste a resource. It's such a strange oversight. It's not a big problem. I was swimming in ammo and healing items at almost all times, but it is a problem that didn't exist before. Escorting Ashley is pretty much the same, although now her automatically ducking out of your line of fire can be a bit of an issue. When aiming was a binary button press, it worked perfectly. You aim, she ducks. But now, what the game does and doesn't consider aiming is more broad. There were times when a group of cultists were closing in on her and I wanted her to run toward me, but because I had my weapon ready down at my side, she refused to move. It's another quirk you have to get used to. Really though, the biggest problem with RE4 from a gameplay perspective is that, well, it wasn't originally made with VR in mind, and despite the best efforts of this version's developers, you are constantly reminded of that. Time and again, you're yanked out of the experience and placed in this theater void to watch something happen rather than doing it yourself, and it seems like they randomly chose what actions to do this for and which ones not to. I understand why you would show actual story moments in this way, but you might not realize how often RE4 cuts to show a door unlocking or enemies flooding into a room. That's normally fine, but in VR, cutting to these scenes rips you out of the situation and is a real immersion killer. It would have been better to just use audio cues to signal these changes instead. Then there's the other inconsistencies. Doing a roundhouse briefly zooms the perspective out a bit to show the action. Not the most elegant solution, but it keeps you in the game, it works. The suplex, however, that requires the theater for some reason. Going up ladders does a quick fade to black to maintain the perspective, but pushing ladders over? That's still a cutscene. This in particular makes the cabin defense section a total mess, cause every 10 seconds you're being thrown into the Shadow Realm to watch Leon do something you should have been able to do yourself. Side note, by the way, I also had the first half of that cabin fight bug out on me, with no Ganados actually managing to breach our defenses, which left Lewis and I just standing there awkwardly making small talk. Doors that require keys let you actually insert and turn the key yourself. Really cool! But scanning the village chief's eyeball, cutscene. One instance of this I was really taken aback by was the minecart bit. It plays out normally until you get to the downhill track at the end. I saw it coming and put my hands in the air ready to have a wild roller coaster ride, only for it to suddenly boot me to the void. It was as baffling as it was disappointing. If these cutaways were all optional, something to make the game more comfortable for certain users, that'd be one thing. But remember that I played without any of those toggles on, and I refuse to believe there weren't more elegant ways to handle all this. And in case you're wondering, yes, the QuickTime events are still here. I do like that they've added a slight pause right before the input comes up to let players know they're coming, but honestly, I'd recommend just turning the QTEs off. The magic of VR comes with being able to realistically interact with what's around you, and wildly waggling your hands or thrusting the controllers in a particular direction is the exact opposite of that. Especially when your correct input isn't registered properly, which happened to me a handful of times. Now that I've gone over everything this version of RE4 has, let's talk about everything that's missing. The only thing you're getting here is the main campaign. The Ada side stories? Nope, they're gone. Mercenaries mode? Nowhere to be found. I don't even think this game has all the unlockable weapons, namely the hand cannon, the PRL, and the Chicago typewriter. Now, I can't confirm that with 100% certainty, because I didn't finish the game on Professional, and I hope to God I'm mistaken. But I can say it's been a week since launch, and there is zero video of these weapons being used anywhere. Not on YouTube, not on Twitter, there's nothing. So either every content creator collectively decided to not upload any footage of these guns, or they don't exist, and I'm betting it's the latter. Oh, but you can access the shooting range from the main menu now, so that's something. Look, VR is super cool and all, but it alone isn't enough of a value add to balance out all this missing content. And that's before we get into the censorship nonsense. What, you think I wasn't gonna mention that? For those of you who aren't aware, quite a few lines of dialogue and snippets of cutscenes were removed from the game for being demeaning or sexist or problematic, whatever stupid buzzword you want to use. Any hint of Leon flirting with Hunnigan on the radio, including the entire post-credits conversation? Cut. The classic President's Daughter ballistics line? Cut. This one is actually funny, cause the missing context now makes Ashley look like a massive asshole.
Small world, eh?
Who are you?
Oh, excuse me, your highness.
Lewis saying Leon is better with the ladies? Cut, for some reason. I knew you'd be fine if you landed on your butt? That's gone too. Ashley asking Leon if he wants some overtime? No, can't have that in 2021. These cuts aren't even well hidden, they're blatantly obvious, and anyone would be able to tell that something's off. You're not even allowed to put your hands anywhere near Ashley in-game. They disappear when you try, but of course you can molest the merchant all day long, no problem. Like, who are these alterations for? This game has been out for 16 years. I've literally never seen anyone complain about these lines. In fact, I've seen the opposite. But if there was some tiny vocal minority that was truly outraged by this, fuck them! They weren't gonna buy the game anyway. Of course, the rebuttal I'm likely to get to all this is a dismissive, you're just upset because you're a dumb, horny gamer guy. Look, dude, I have the internet. If I want porn, I can find porn. That's not the problem. The problem is that all these lines are part of the game's charm and identity, and by removing them, they're not only diminishing both and hurting the pacing of scenes, but they're spitting in the face of the original team's vision. If you really want to appease the easily offended, then okay, throw up a warning at the start that says, "This game contains light flirting, watch out," and leave the content itself intact. Removing elements from a piece of art is never the answer. Look, I know they'll never see this, but to the person or persons at Facebook that demanded these changes, and the higher-ups at Capcom that then agreed to them, allow me to speak for the sane and rational in the crowd when I say, you are not a hero. You're a coward. The point I'd like to end on is the game's asking price. All of the early reviews I saw made no mention of this since they got free copies early, and I couldn't find any information about it prior to launch. It almost seemed like Oculus was intentionally hiding the price for as long as they could, and I can see why. Resident Evil 4 on the Quest 2 costs $40, and I'm sorry, that's way too much. Yes, Resi 4 is a masterpiece. The product does have effort behind it. VR brings a fresh new dynamic to the game. But we're still talking about a 16-year-old title that's available elsewhere for much cheaper. You can buy RE4 on Steam right now for $20, even less since it often goes on sale, and it has all of the extra side content and isn't needlessly censored. If this version included everything like it should have, then the new control style could justify $30, maybe. But as it is, no. They're relying on name recognition to overcharge people, and it's going to work, but I urge you not to give in and wait for a reduction. Experiencing Resident Evil 4 in VR is a very fun novelty, no doubt, and I'm not surprised so many are praising it. But the total lack of challenge, limited interactions compared to other VR shooters, and clunky adherence to the original's design made that novelty wear out its welcome before the end. By the time I completed the castle chapters, I was pretty much over it, and wanted to be lounging back with a standard controller in my hands again. Plus, the amount of missing content is simply unforgivable. If you do happen to have a Quest 2 laying around, please wait for a sale. For everyone else, the original classic is all you'll ever need.